is Ed Robertson, and this is the Mountain and Prairie Podcast, where I introduce you to some of the innovative and creative individuals who are shaping the future of the American West. I meet most of these people through my work in ranch brokerage and land conservation, or through my hobbies and interests that revolve around spending time up high in the mountains. My guests include ranchers, writers, entrepreneurs, conservationists, athletes, artists, adventurers, pretty much anyone who's doing important work and has an interesting story to tell. My guest today is Jillian Lukiwski. Jillian is a writer, photographer, and silversmith who lives near the banks of the Snake River just outside of Pocatello, Idaho. Her quiet confidence and deliberate approach to living have allowed Jillian to blaze her own trail, creating a rewarding career and an authentic life centered around the unique landscape of southeastern Idaho. When not working, Jillian and her husband Robert enjoy the Western lifestyle from every imaginable angle. Bird hunting with their German shorthair pointers, big game hunting, fishing, running, horseback riding, mountain biking, caring for their farm animals, and cultivating their land. Big Western landscapes have always been an important part of Jillian's life. Her father worked for Canada's National Park Service, so she was raised with a deep appreciation for the outdoors and adventure. From an early age, she was riding horses, falling off horses, following her father into the backcountry, and building a personal foundation of self-sufficiency and toughness. As a young woman, she applied that ingrained tenacity to writing, photography, and creating jewelry, and has since built a loyal following of admirers and customers around the world. We had a fun conversation and managed to cover a wide range of interesting topics. I could have talked to Jillian for hours. We discussed her life path that eventually landed her in southeastern Idaho, and we chatted about the unique nature of that region of the world. We discussed her creative process, how she's been mostly self-taught in all of her art forms, and how she's been able to manage the distractions of social media and the online world. We chat about the importance of being uncomfortable and how self-imposed physical and mental challenges can help to inoculate oneself against the inevitable difficulties of life. Jillian's a voracious reader, so we had a great discussion about books, as well as how reading has contributed to her success as a writer. We cover a lot, so be sure to check out the episode notes for a full list of everything we discussed. This was a very fun and inspiring interview, and I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. The way that I normally start these interviews is I ask people, when you meet somebody for the first time, never met them before, and they ask you that question, what do you do? How do you answer that?
When people ask me what I do, I usually tell them I'm a freelance photographer, a writer, and a metalsmith.
That's very succinct and to the point, and it leads me to about 1 million questions, which we were just laughing about, these pages of questions I have for you. And I was thinking about the best way to kind of dive in, and I think the landscape where you live is so beautiful, and it seems to really influence everything you do. So I was wondering if we could start out a little bit just by talking about where you live, the landscape, how you ended up there.
Yeah. I live on the Snake River of Idaho. I don't like to say exactly where, just for reasons of safety and privacy, but sure. Our farm, the end of our farm, actually the end of our farm driveway is the Snake River. So we're down in the canyon, and it's high desert. It looks a lot like New Mexico in some ways. It's got that same really beautiful, glowy light quality in the morning and in the evenings. And I mean, it's south central Idaho, so we get so many bluebird days throughout the year. It's very sunny and temperate too. It's considered, the banana belt of Idaho. So our winters here aren't as harsh as they are in the rest of the state. It's a very overlooked part of the state. People usually just blow through it on the interstate and don't stop to explore it at all. But it's the canyon country really of Idaho, and it's very beautiful and very wild.
I think in general, Idaho is overlooked. Like when you think about Western states, I think Idaho is the most underrated state there is. There's so much cool stuff to do there. And I think between, Jackson Hole and then Montana has this aura about it. But Idaho is just spectacular. How did you end up there?
Oh, do you want me to start at the very beginning?
Yeah, definitely.
It's an odyssey.
That's what I like.
Well, good. My husband and I eloped 14 years ago now, and I was in Canada going to school, and he was outside of Chicago going to college at Wheaton College, actually. Yep. And so once we both finished school for the year, we actually then told our families that we were married in December, and we took off to Alaska to work for a rafting company. And we stayed up there through the season. We thought about staying through the winter, but work gets scarce up there. So we drove back down, and we were in Northern California, where Rob was timber cruising for a few months, and we were getting my green card paperwork kind of started at that point in time. So from there, he actually got a job as a fish biologist with the federal government in Arizona, actually working with endangered fishes that are native to the lower Colorado River system. So from there, we went down to Arizona and lived outside of Parker on the Colorado River Indian Tribe Reservation at a remote satellite station for U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And we did that for 3.5 years. And, Rob was so good at his job. He could have worked anywhere on the lower Colorado with Fish and Wildlife doing anything that he wanted. But we both really struggled with that low desert climate. It just is so hot down there, like 130 in the summertime and just 9 months of heat, which was really hard for me as a Canadian. So I told Rob, hey, like, what's the thing you've always wanted to do? If we're going to leave Arizona, let's go big and let's make a huge life transition. So from the moment that I met him in New Zealand, actually. He had always talked about smoke jumping, and he'd done a couple years on engine crews, actually, in Montana, but had never hot-shotted and really, really wanted to smoke jump. So I told him, well, go for it. So he started applying on USA Jobs for fire positions, and he ended up getting hired by the Snake River Hotshots, which are based out of Pocatello, Idaho. And I told him to take the job, and we sent a bunch of our stuff to the thrift shop and packed the rest of it in a U-Haul. And the first time I saw Idaho was when I crossed over the Utah-Idaho border in a U-Haul truck, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was beautiful. I mean, it's spectacular. You come up through Salt Lake with the Wasatch on your right-hand side, and it's so beautiful and rugged. And Pocatello actually gets a really bad rap, mostly from Boise people and Idaho Falls people. They hate on Pocatello rapidly. It's so funny to me. But it's actually a really well-kept secret in the state. It's this narrow little valley with the Portneuf River going through it. And then it has an east bench and a west bench and a 9,000-foot peak at the south end of the valley. It's beautiful with some of the best single track in the state, I think. And the mountains go up to beautiful aspen and mixed Doug fir and pondy pine forest. It's a really beautiful area. If you like immediate access to public lands and you don't like crowds, Pocatello is ridiculous. It's amazing. And it's convenient enough to not be inconvenient, which is what I always like to say about it.
Yeah, I think that whole area is just beautiful. I used to live in Jackson Hole, and I would drive through there a lot to get to different, work things I had to do. And I was always struck by the landscape. It's really, really unique. I've been everywhere out west, but I can't really think of a place that has that same kind of landscape. And it's striking and it's beautiful and it's, pretty rugged, and with the canyons, I love it.
Yeah, super rugged. It's like somebody took a piece of paper and scrunched it into a ball and then just loosely opened it up again. It's just filled, that whole corner of the state's filled with incredible little micro ranges and just beautiful wild country. It's just wonderful out there.
So you've been all over. I read in some of your great writing that I found online, you were talking about your upbringing in Canada and how your father worked for the National Park Service up there. And so you guys spent time at a lot of different national parks. Could you just talk about that and your upbringing and kind of how that shaped your outlook and helped shape this life that you've created for yourself?
Yeah. So my dad was, up in Canada, they call it a warden. If you work for the Park Service, you're a park warden. Down in the States, I think they use the word ranger. So he was a park warden in the national park system. And my mom was a nurse. So she had one of those portable occupations because there's always a nursing shortage everywhere. So they went from Prince Albert National Park, which is in Saskatchewan, to Elk Island National Park, which is in Alberta, to Wood Buffalo National Park, which is where I was born, which is also in Alberta, and they were living at Fort Chippewa there. And then from there, our family went to Revelstoke, where my dad, which is Golden, BC, basically, where my dad was working at Revelstoke and Banff. And then from there, we went to Manitoba to Rocky Mountain National Park. So I saw a lot of the Western provinces as a really little girl, and was living. I mean, my best memories from my childhood are probably from Rocky Mountain National Park, which is just a really beautiful mixed boreal forest national park that's really overlooked, kind of in south central Manitoba. And I had a really wild childhood. Like, I just remember spending every single day, like from sunrise to sunset outside, with the bears and the elk and the moose and my sisters and our horses. It was a really beautiful childhood.
Just out of curiosity, because I have a little girl and I've got another little girl on the way. And so I'm always kind of thinking and somewhat worrying about how to raise them so they'll be tough and adventurous. And did your parents put limits? Did they say, hey, no TV, we're not sitting around inside? Or was it just kind of the thing you guys did was go outside and you didn't need any rules or regulations to make you do that?
I think we went outside just because we viewed the outdoors as an extension of our living space. But we did not. There was no computer. Like, computers didn't come into my life until I was in like grade 7, I think. Mm-hmm. But we didn't watch hardly any TV. We had a major cap on it. It was like a half hour of the Cosby Show. Yeah. If good, like during the week. And then on Sundays in Canada, there was evening programming. It was the Disney show where they would show like portions of Disney movies.
Yeah. They had that where I was growing up too.
Yeah. And then after that would come on the TV show Road to Avonlea, which is an extended story of Anne of Green Gables and the writing of L.M. Montgomery, basically. So we were allowed to watch that stuff, but we weren't kids that came home from school and sat in front of the TV. Like, we didn't have a TV for a babysitter. We were really just, we'd come home, get off the school bus, and then we're just immediately doing whatever we were going to do outside pretty much until it got dark. And then we came in, we ate dinner, we watched the Cosby Show, and then we brushed our teeth and went to bed. And it was like that every day. Like, we just, I think my mom would have kept a closer watch on us if she wasn't working, but she was working at the time as a nurse. So she just was tired when she came home. And so we got kicked out of the house. And then my dad was really busy, like doing sting operations on, poaching rings in that park. And he was so busy with work too, that I think we just went outside and did what we wanted because nobody told us to do otherwise.
That's cool. I read in a article that you had written about you and your father and kind of the relationship you guys had and how he, just kind of set high standards and expected you to keep up. And there was a image in one of your essays about you just riding a horse as a young girl, and your dad just never even really looked back. He just had the confidence in you that you could keep up, and you did. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I'm not sure if he was confident in me or if he was being negligent as a father, but he did expect me to keep up. And, my dad he's a very complicated person. He had a really tough childhood. And I think his definition of love and how to show it is really different than my current definition of love and how to show it. So, I understand him better than most people do because he's my dad and I love him. But, I think he did want me to be tough, and he did want me to do whatever I wanted to do and to feel like I could try whatever I wanted to try. And a lot of times he'd sit back with kind of like a smirk on his face because I just was this little tenacious, little clingy little burr of a girl that just would hold on to the horse while it was galloping. There's one time I called my dad into the barn because I had just started, I was probably in like kindergarten. I had just started galloping or like loping and galloping on my horse, and it was exhilarating, and I wanted to show him that I could do it. So I saddled my Palomino with an overturned grain bucket, and then I climbed in the saddle and I took the horse out into the corral while my dad watched, and I was like, "Ready, Dad, watch." And I started loping around the corral, and I hadn't done the cinch on the saddle tight enough. And the saddle slowly started to spin, and then it went completely under the belly of my horse. And I fell off and plopped onto the ground. And, my dad didn't panic and run over and see if I was okay or like stop my nose for bleeding or anything like that. He just was kind of like, "You didn't do your cinch tight enough. You have to do it tighter next time." And then he kind of patted me on the back and then went back into the barn to do whatever he was doing. And that was kind of the end of it. I never got mollycoddled. When I fell down, I got told to get back up again. And even like when I'd go on patrols with him by horseback, I fake being sick so I could go to work with him for the day and miss the school bus. And even then, like if I got tossed off my horse on a really, steep ride up a hill or something, my dad just would laugh and brush me off and tell me to get back on. Like he just treated me like I could do it. So I did. And I think that's something that's really missing in our society these days. We treat so many kids like they're breakable, but they need to deal with falling off and getting back on. And I'm really thankful that he was kind of tough on me that way, because I think it's made me not quit things as an adult. Like I can hang on. I can withstand anything for 5-10 more minutes, another week, another month. And like I just don't give up easily. So I'm really glad that he was kind of tough love with me.
Yeah, I agree that I feel like that's missing. And I'm not an expert by any means in being a father, but I feel like if the kind of the two things I would want my daughter to have is, one, be tough, and two, be compassionate towards other people. And I feel like, and I don't know, but it seems like the only way you can really train the toughness is by kind of getting your ass kicked every now and then, and going out and falling off and falling down and learning from it. I mean, I don't know how you can learn those lessons any other way, really. If you figure it out, let me know. So I read that you dropped out of university. You went to several different places and ended up dropping out. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and why that college experience just wasn't for you?
Yeah, I liked a lot of things about school. I liked my science classes and geology. I liked all of that kind of stuff. But I also knew, I think from a really young age, that I was generally unemployable by the real world. So I ended up, doing part of my fine arts degree, and then eventually I just quit. And the reason for it was that while I was working on that degree, I was also metalsmithing full time. And at a certain point, I realized that people were going to art school to learn how to be artists and to learn how to be successful artists and actually be working artists. And I was already doing all of that. So it seemed kind of pointless to me. And we also just reached a point within our family too, where we just needed me to work. So, there just was a time when we just needed the money to be coming in from my job. So it just made sense to let go of it. And I never felt like I needed to be a pedigreed human being. Like I'm kind of unapologetic and okay with being unpapered as a university dropout, like, because the proof is in the pudding. Like I'm doing something meaningful with my life that has a skill set that I'm still developing and honing. So it wasn't for me. And at a certain point too, it felt like I was jumping through a lot of hoops that didn't matter to me, just playing the university game. So
I think that shows a level of maturity at a young age that is rare. I mean, I think most people just feel like, well, that's what somebody's telling me to do, and so that's what I need to do. But to be able to kind of look at it objectively and realize that, hey, I don't really need that for what I'm going to do. You mentioned that you thought you might be unemployable from a young age. Is that did you always unemployable from a college wouldn't add any value? Did you always know you wanted to pursue the arts, or how did that go?
I think I knew that I needed to do something where I was self-employed and my own boss. 'Cause, I've held down any kind of job you can think of, really. Like I flipped burgers at Burger King when I was in high school.
Yep.
I was a librarian at an elementary school when we were in Arizona. I've done a lot of different things, and I always reached a point within the work where I was bored. Mm-hmm. And then my my effort that I was putting into the job decreased, and I became really a mediocre employee. So I just realized that if I wanted to be the very best version of myself, I needed to do something that required self-motivation. And I think I knew that like pretty much from the age of 20, probably.
Got it. And so silversmithing, how did you initially get into that? Because you've got such a talent for it. And you've had a lot of success with that, but it seems like it would be the kind of thing that would just take so long to get competent at. And so what led to your initial interest in that? Well,
I loved jewelry from a very young age. I had a great aunt. Her name was Aunt Edie. And she would always, anytime we visited her, she'd bring up a bag of costume jewelry from the basement at her place. And I remember sifting through that jewelry, which was gaudy and made of paste gems and, it just was tacky, crazy jewelry. And I just remember thinking it was so beautiful and interesting. And that was really when I really fell in love with jewelry. And any of my oldest friends would tell you that I've always loved jewelry. It's what I've spent my money on. It's what I spent my money on in high school. And then in my 20s was, I'd save up all my pennies for, a silver ring with amethyst at the import shop. I just loved it. So, and I made it too. I identify as an introvert, and a lot of times before I even discovered boys, I would stay home all weekend long and just, bead jewelry and read books in my bedroom on the floor. That was like my idea of like a really awesome weekend. So when we were in Arizona and I was waiting for my green card to process, I noticed that a community college in Lake Havasu, actually 45 minutes north of where we were living, was offering silversmithing classes, which is really common in the Southwest to have a jewelry program at the colleges and at the community college level. So I signed up for it and I started to go into Havasu 2 nights a week to do it. And, it was a really primitive workshop that I learned to first silversmith in. And they didn't have a lot of modern technology. So they taught me how to saw and bezel set stones and solder very, very poorly. And anybody can do those things. I mean, it's really easy. You can take a jewelry class and you can build a ring. And it's really not a big deal. It's not rocket science. It's pretty scientific and easy work if you just learn the methods. Mm-hmm. And so, but what I was good at was designing jewelry and translating, aspects of my life into storytelling with metal. And so I started, I've been at the bench for 12 years now, 11 and a half or 12 years. And the Noisy Plume has been in existence for 10 years. And so I've been at it for 10 years and my skills have really grown and my tool collection in my studio has grown, which increases my abilities as I continue in this medium. But that's how it all got started. And I love it. It's really, it's fun. It's a fun thing to sit down and work on. And it's meaningful for a lot of people when they get my work. Whatever it is that I'm translating in metal, it resonates with them. So
do you have any mentors, in the jewelry making world, or was this just kind of a thing that you, slowly over time created your own look and created your own techniques for doing it? I know that you mentioned learning the basic techniques, but have you had any influences over the years?
Yeah, most of the techniques that I'm using now are self-taught. Like I've just fiddled around in the medium enough that I've learned how to put my little touch on things, or I've learned how to, do a technique just because I wanted to build something a certain way. I have traveled to take some silversmithing classes, but I find the creative energy in workshops to be sometimes like overwhelming for me, and almost so that I feel drained like within an hour of being at them. So I don't tend to travel for workshops or anything like that anymore. And I don't really have many mentors. I really am truly self-taught. I don't specifically, I have friends who are metalsmiths, but I don't specifically find my creative community in the metalsmithing realm. I tend to hang more with filmmakers and photographers and writers, but I'm also really careful about what I let myself look at. I really want to know that my ideas are coming directly from my life experiences and from my values and from my interpretation of beauty. So I don't even really look at what jewelers are doing that much, because I really want to guard my inspiration, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And I was actually just getting ready to ask you that exact question. So you read my mind. I was wondering, because I've heard of other artists that do that, because they just want to be sure that everything is coming from their brain and that they're not, accidentally absorbing somebody else's work. That's really cool. That's funny that you read my mind like that.
Good. I'm not looking to make like the most original jewelry in the world, because I really feel that everything has been done, but I am looking to have my ideas be an original welling up, that they're actually coming up out of me, that I'm not just regurgitating the work of other people or changing a design 10% and recreating the works of other people, which gets, and I think that a lot of people start going down that path when they look at a lot of work. And I kind of feel sorry for like modern day artists. Like, back in the day when you were an artist living in the middle of nowhere, just focused on like with your putting your head down and focusing on your craft. Like you couldn't turn on a phone at 8 o'clock in the morning, look at 1,000 different designs from your medium that other people were making, and then go ahead with your workday. I think it's confusing for people's creative voice to have so much access visually to what other people are making. And I also believe in a collective consciousness, though. So I know that we're all on the same planet, drawing inspiration from the same places. But I think for art to have meaning, it needs to be, our creative voices need to be truthful and true to who we are as people. So I definitely believe in guarding inspiration to a certain degree. I think it's really good to just be mindful of how much you let your eyes take in on a daily basis.
So speaking of that, you've got a very devoted social media following, and yet you're in this artistic world that requires concentration and requires solitude. And how do you balance that? How do you balance this constant kind of stream of, on the good side, admirers, and then on the bad side it could be distractions from your work? How do you manage to keep use the social media as a tool versus be jerked around by it like most people are?
I just try to limit how much time I spend on my phone and on my computer. I'm actually one of the rare people who doesn't always have my phone on my body. A lot of times I'm not sure where it is, which is delightful to be kind of less plugged in than the average human being. And I mean, I just try to limit it. Because I'm aware, I quit Facebook like 7 years ago, maybe. And I remember I just quit it cold turkey too. It was very unpremeditated. I got on and I just was like, enough of this. And I just closed down the account, and then I never, and for the first month and a half or two of not having Facebook, anytime I was doing something that was making me really happy, I would turn to my husband and I would say, Robert, if I was on Facebook, I would not have time to do this right now. I remember saying that for 2 months. Anytime I just found myself really enjoying a moment outside or reading a book or, baking or cooking. And so I've just tried to keep practicing that where, I don't take it too seriously and I do things at my own pace. I've said that before, that things in my life take as long as they take. Like if it takes me a week to email back or a month, that's nothing personal. It's just how long it took me. So people used to have to wait 2 months to get letters from Europe because they came over on a ship, and they were all okay. And it meant even more to them when the letter arrived in their mailbox and they got to hear from great aunt Joni. It's just, everybody just needs to slow the heck down sometimes. So
I completely agree. I 100% agree with you on that. Do you have a specific routine you follow during the day? I know from reading your blog that you put in a lot of hours at the bench, but you also are able to get out and enjoy the landscape around your home. So is there a certain pattern you follow every day, or is it more just you kind of do different things every day?
I sort of have a routine, but it's not hour by hour. And I think what helped me develop a routine was I tried to identify 5 things that I must do absolutely every single day in order to feel like I am living the absolute highest quality of my life as possible. And they were something like, I want to read from a paper book every day. I want to cook a minimum of 2 meals from scratch. Usually if I don't cook a third, it's because I skipped lunch because I just didn't feel like I could take the time to eat and I just had a quick snack instead. And I wanted to do good work, either photography, writing, or metalsmithing. I wanted to fit in some kind of one of those, work in one of those 3 mediums or all 3 in the day, and then have some kind of a quality discussion with Robert before I go to sleep. At the very end of the day, did I talk to my husband and have a meaningful, connecting conversation? Great. So those were the 5 aspects that I wanted to have in my life every single day if I could. And then anything on top of that was just kind of the cherry on top, bonus material.
Yep.
But so, I wake up in the morning and I have a lot of animals here. So usually if Rob's not home and it's during the fire season, I make a cup of tea and I take it out with me while I feed the chickens, check the ducks, the turkeys, and the horse, and deal with the dogs and the cats and all of that stuff. And then most people begin their day with emailing, but that's just about my most not favorite thing to do. So, I usually go straight to work, whatever it's going to be for the day. And then if I make it to emails at the end of the day, then God bless me, but usually I don't. And then, I love to knock off at the end of the day. Metalsmithing is actually really hard on my body. I have some chronic neck pain issues and chronic issues in a shoulder because it's very sedentary still work. So I love to end the day with usually a run. I usually try to do, a minimum of 5 miles if I'm running. And then if I'm walking, I just do whatever walking I'm going to do for the day or hiking. And then if I'm in McCall, I'm usually mountain biking. So we spend Rob's in McCall the whole fire season because our Airstream's up there and that's where he works out of. So if I'm up for the weekend, I do a lot of mountain biking and swimming while I'm in town. So, but that's what the days look like here. They're pretty chill. I work really hard, but that just made everything sound really tranquil, but it's not. Don't worry, everyone. I have my share of chaos.
No, that's, to be able to do that every day. That's a full day and it requires focus. And so I think that's very impressive. Can you talk about running a little bit? That's something we share in a common passion there for running. How long have you been running and do you run for a goal or do you just enjoy the process and are able to enjoy running for running versus having to have something to train for?
Yeah. I've been running since grade 7 actually. And I was a track and fielder. I ran 800, 1500 and 3000 meter races and did a little bit of cross country too. But, I just started running and I have a body type that kind of thrives on it. And it's just something that I have practiced no matter where we've lived. And I love it. I mean, it gives me, a lot of people talk about meditation and I think that's sometimes what running is for me because my mind really quiets when I'm out there and, it's rhythmic and calming in that regard. And, if there's something I need to think about, I'll go running. If Rob and I are having a disagreement on something, he sends me out the door and tells me to go running. It's just it's very cleansing, clearing activity that gives me space to adjust my perspective. And I also have German shorthair pointers. So they need to, if it's not hunting season, they have to go outside,
yes.
A long ramble, at least once a day, sometimes twice. So, and the other thing I really love about running is just that, I leave from the front door here because our farm is flanked on 2 sides with BLM land.
Oh, nice.
So part of it is just doing a survey of what I consider an extension of my property. I like to go out and I like to learn the habits of the mule deer and the pronghorn. I like to, see how the beaver slide has deviated down on the riverbank. I like to yell at the porcupines for girdling the trees. I like to check on all of my wildlife and, see what's going on out there. I feel like it's part of, we live off the land here. And I think it's part of my caretaking position is just to go out and to be in relationship with the land. And that's something that I can do on foot when I'm running. That's just a added part of my day.
Yeah. I think there's something really cool about running the same trail over and over and over, and over the course of several years, and over the course of, multiple seasons. And I found that you really get to know a place better than you ever could by getting out there. And even there's this little route that I used to do, several times a week. And it got to the point where I knew which routes I could step on and which ones I couldn't because they were, certain ones were loose and certain ones weren't. And I knew where I could expect to see some mule deer hiding out. And, it's just, it's really a unique thing that you cannot shortcut. You have to put in the time. And I think I completely understand what you're talking about. That's really cool.
And it can be so stimulating too, because I never feel like I leave the front door and I cannot stop running no matter what. Like if I see something that I want to explore along the way, or if I find a cool skull or something and I want to look around the area for different interesting bones, like I stop and I do stuff sometimes when I'm running. I'm not a slave driver out there because the point is to be out there and to be exploring on foot. Really, that's how I view running these days. And I don't do races. I don't do any competition stuff. I really just do it for myself and to be in connection at the end of the day with the earth and to get my body moving after being at the bench all day too. So
I wish I could enjoy the process as much as you do with everything, because I know that that's what I'm supposed to be doing, and I know that that's the best way, and I have a full appreciation for enjoying the process. But I've found with me, especially with running or athletic stuff, if I don't have a goal, I just won't do it. And I know that it's the process is what's important. I know it makes me feel better. I know it makes me more productive and happy. And my wife does the same thing to me. If I'm in a bad mood, she says, "You need to go running." And if you figure out how you did that, let me know, because I need to know. You mentioned your dogs, and I'd love to talk a little bit about your hunting and how that has played a role in your life. Did you grow up hunting at all, or was that something you came into later in life?
Oh no, it's like one of the great tragedies of my life is that I didn't learn to hunt from my dad, who does hunt. I grew up eating a lot of moose meat, actually. And he did some grouse hunting too when I was little. But he, to my dad's credit, he did teach me to fish. So thanks for that, Dad. But I married a guy who's from Northern California. Rob's from Grass Valley. And when he was in high school, he decided he wanted to quail hunt. So he taught himself how to quail hunt. It took him like 2 years, I think, before he finally shot a bird. And he didn't have a dog. He was just going on foot by himself, which is a pretty difficult way to hunt birds. And so when we got married, I really wanted a dog, and he told me he'd always wanted a short hair because he really wanted to do more bird hunting. So we ended up with our first short hair. And we were living in Arizona at the time, and I remember really loving the training aspect to working with a bird dog. And I loved watching that partnership with my husband and the dog. And I would, when Rob was going out to hunt in the evenings, we hunted tribal land that was right behind the satellite station that we were operating. And I just would walk out into the land with him and watch. And I loved watching the dogs hunt. It's just, watching a bird dog in the field is one of life's great joys. They're just so good at what they do. They're so talented and gifted. And so after a few months of just helping Rob with training and hiking with him while he was hunting, I kind of decided that maybe I wanted to carry a gun while I went out there with him. So I started carrying a gun, and then I started actually trying to shoot birds, and then I started hitting birds. And then I got a taste of that beauty that you can have, the beautiful partnership you can have with a bird dog too. And then that's really when I fell in love with it. And then, I wouldn't say I'm the world's best bird hunter by any means, but I do really enjoy it. And most of the enjoyment for me comes with the partnership with the bird dog. It's nice to feed ourselves at the end of the day, but I really love working with my dogs and being with my family while I'm in the field too. With Rob and I and our pups is really special. So.
Yeah, I'm with you that watching a bird dog work is one of the coolest things you can see. And I read a book a while back. You may have read it before. I think it was called Wolf in the Parlor. And it's about the relationship between humans and dogs, and how that you can't find a set of human bones in North America where there are not dog bones as well. And so some anthropologists think that there's always been this partnership between dogs and humans, and that partnership is one of the things that allowed us to kind of separate ourselves from the Neanderthals, and it's in our DNA. Just like it's in a dog's DNA to work with humans, it's in our DNA to work with dogs, and that's why we have this just unbelievable bond with dogs. It's a pretty interesting book. It's written by a scientist, a science writer, so it gets a little detailed at times, but you might like that. It's pretty cool.
Oh, I just wrote down the name of it for myself because I'm a real keener that way, but it sounds great. Did you see that movie that just came out? It came out in December, I think, that's kind of parallels what you're talking about. I'm not sure. Is it called Atlas? It's about like some little cave dwelling kid and his relationship with a wolf. It's supposed to be like the story of man's first dog, basically.
No, I haven't, but I'll definitely look it up because that sounds really interesting. I never had dogs as a kid, and I got one when I was a senior in college and had it for 15 years. And the bond that you form with those animals, it's definitely beyond just like a fondness. That there's something in DNA in our DNA that makes that attraction just like nothing else. It's the craziest thing. I couldn't believe it when I had to put her down, man. That was one of the most intense things I've ever had to deal with.
The The only time I've seen my husband cry is when one of our dogs dies. It's just the worst. I'm like, oh no, our dog has passed away. And worse yet, now my husband is going to cry. Worst to see that happen. It's just the worst. The pit.
Yeah, that's rough. Holy cow.
Dogs are amazing. And then when you're getting to be partnered with a working dog that's being used according to its instincts, that takes it to the next level. It's just a very special thing. It
really is. So when you post photos of hunting online, do you ever get any blowback from that? Because obviously I'm a huge proponent of hunting, and I think some of the world's most committed conservationists are hunters, and it's a thing that we need to manage wildlife properly. But there is this contingent of people online that are anti-hunting. Do you ever run into that? And if so, do you have any good ways of dealing with that?
Yeah, I used to run into that a lot, but I've done a really great job of controlling the climate of my spaces. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, too, I'm not a celebrity hunter, and I don't ever want to be. Like, I post images about hunting, and I write about hunting because it's a part of my life, and my online spaces are about sharing aspects of my life that I find interesting or beautiful, or lessons that I've learned through my lifestyle. That's what my space is about. I'm not branding myself, and I'm not marketing myself a certain direction or in a certain way. This is my life. If I share it, it's because it's important to me and I found it beautiful, and I think you might find it interesting, uplifting, or beautiful. So I have been smacked around a little on in moments when I've chosen to share hunting imagery or when I've written about hunting. And sometimes it's been violent. I've had people tell me to go shoot myself and not shoot deer, which I think is horrifying. And I've had other things. I've had people who are really respectful say, I have never appreciated hunting culture. I have never appreciated hunting, but I really appreciate the way you portray it and the way you talk about it and the way you obviously have a respect for wildlife, and it's changing the way I view hunting. And I'm so thankful that you're sharing what you're sharing about your life. So, I mean, I've had resistance from both ends of the spectrums, and I'm totally okay with people disagreeing with my lifestyle, but I won't accept people coming into my space and actually, violently vomiting their disgusting, hateful opinions on me for the way that I've chosen to live. Like, that's just unacceptable to me. So I really work hard to make my space a space that everyone can feel safe in and comfortable in. And whenever someone's violent like that, I shut it down quick. But I also used to take it really personally when people would, oppose our hunting lifestyle here and our subsistence lifestyle. And I don't take it as personal anymore. I used to be, to my great shame, I used to be very reactive about it. And, I would put people in their place, and I am sorry that I did that a few times, but I've learned a little bit of self-control since then. And I've also had my perspective shifted on it, that when people are opposed to hunting, they're not really opposed to hunting. I think a lot of times people are just terrified of suffering, and they're terrified of death. And that's something that they're projecting onto me by being opposed to seeing a dead animal or a harvested animal. It's their own fear of those things that actually has them speaking out. And it's their removal from a comprehension of life and death cycles and energy transfers and energy cyclings in our world that have been in place since the very beginning. It's a removal from all of that has them lashing out at me. And it doesn't help anybody at all for me to lash out in response. So
speaking of hunting, I read an article that you wrote from a few years back that it was called "And So I Hunt," and you were talking about the kind of why you go out and on these hard adventures and the benefits of going out and really kind of struggling and pushing yourself out of your comfort zone in the backcountry. And I'll put a link to that article because I just absolutely loved it. But could you just talk a little bit about that mindset and that your ability to want to seek out discomfort and what that brings you?
Yeah. I'm glad you're asking about that. I wrote that piece so long ago, and I wrote it from excerpts when my husband and I flew into the Frank Church for an elk hunt for me. And we ended up getting stranded on our airstrip for like 3 days. longer than we were supposed to be. And we were really hungry and the weather was bad. And there was, I mean, anytime you're out hunting, there's some kind of suffer fest going on, which is one of the reasons I like hunting. But sometimes I wonder if suffering in life should kind of be approached as a practice so that we can kind of begin to develop a little self-control when it comes to how we react to our suffering, so that we're capable of kind of stepping outside of it and stepping away from it and observing it instead of getting dragged down by it and really giving our souls to it. And then, you know, getting to a point where we have to medicate ourselves and we need to do all these things to try to, you know, bring back the spark and the light in our life. But, you know, we live in this society that is terrified of suffering. And like I said a few minutes ago, terrified of death. You know, we work so hard to combat our aging and to live as long as possible. And so many people want nothing to ever die or ever suffer ever. And that's not how it works. And we live in denial of it. And I think if you can put yourself in situations where you know that you're going to be uncomfortable, you know, you're going to be cold, you know, you're going to be hungry, you know, you're going to be, you know, carrying 90 pounds of meat on your back, 8 miles off a mountain, bushwalking through really steep terrain, you know, it's going to hurt. And you can kind of prepare your mind for it a little bit and have a little self-control while it's all happening. And if you can practice that, then when these unforeseen events and circumstances come our way, when somebody we love, you know, passes away tragically way before they're meant to, it kind of, instead of like getting sucked into the drama of that and the darkness of it, we can kind of, you know, think back to these times when we suffered in moments of our own choosing, when we chose to suffer, and you can kind of draw and remember that you were strong enough to deal with that then, and you can deal with this thing that's happening to you now. I think that you kind of have to like get your body and your soul ready for suffering a little bit. And the more that we remove ourselves from it in life, I think the less equipped we are to just deal with the crap and the darkness that comes our way. So I hunt, I go out and I suffer and I make myself suffer because I think it makes me stronger for those moments that are coming my way that I have no control over. And hopefully I can survive them too.
Yeah, I love that article. I thought it was so great. And there was an Instagram post you did within the last few weeks where you kind of echoed that same thing about being at hunting camp and how everything is harder and you appreciate how tough it is. And I'm with you. I mean, I think suffering is just part of being alive, and it's going to happen. And they're going to be happy times, they're going to be sad times. And trying to avoid the sad times, you're trying to avoid being human.
Well, exactly. And to avoid suffering is really what creates like monodimensionality in our personalities and in our societies. You know, if we are a stone, then suffering is the thing that cuts facets into the face of us and makes us beautiful. It's our suffering that we learn from, and it's our suffering that grows us and develops us and matures us and gives us wisdom. Like you have to have it, otherwise you're just going to be just a boring, flat being that has no richness to your life and no stories to tell. I mean, that's the truth of it.
Completely the truth. That's very well put. You should write, if you haven't already, you should write down exactly what you just said as an essay. Go ahead.
In argument of suffering.
Yeah. Do you have any stories, or is there a particular adventure that comes to mind when you think about a time where it was the definition of suffering, like a time it was extra cold or extra rainy or both, and that sticks out in your mind as, I guess you'd call it like type 2 fun, where it was just terrible at the time, but very rewarding when it's all over?
You know, pretty much anytime we go hunting, there's suffering involved. I mean, if I want to think about suffering in my life, that's just on a day-to-day basis, like normal suffering. It's, you know, anytime we're out big game hunting, or anytime, even if we go chucker hunting here, usually there's like 20 or 30 mile per hour winds. It's bitterly cold. You know, we've been walking through gumbo during the day, and then the temperature plummets at night, and we're holding on to the steel on our shotguns and we can't feel our hands, and it's dark and we still have 3 miles to get to the truck and we're starving. And also our hoses that go to our water hydration in our packs has frozen, so we're thirsty and can't drink. It's like this, like, you know, there's suffering and our dog, you know, but then you get home at the end of the day and you put a fire in the fireplace and you cook dinner or you warm up leftovers or whatever. And it's, you know, that moment when you're suddenly in the comfort of your home is made so much richer by the 8 hours that came before it of discomfort. Like, all the convenience and the beauty and the comfort of life has no meaning if you haven't seen the other side of it. So yeah, we hunt and we suffer here. That's the long and the short of it.
That's very cool. You're speaking my language there. I completely agree with all that. So one more kind of longer question for you. You've created this really unique life for yourself, and it seems to be fulfilling and rewarding and challenging. And you've managed to kind of march to the beat of your own drummer for, it sounds like, the majority of your life. You've had the confidence to kind of do your own thing and not just follow the same path that everybody else follows. How do you have any advice to people who see your life and listen to this and say, I would love to do something like that, but maybe I don't have the confidence, or I don't have the experience. What advice would you give to people who would want to emulate what you've done?
I get asked that question a lot, actually. And usually what I tell people is time is relative and success is relative. And you need to figure out what it is that you like and what it is that you want. And then, you start small and you build as you go, and you allow your life plan and your goals and your dreams to evolve, and you adapt in whatever new direction that you need to take, basically. But, there are a lot of different ways to be successful in life, but the two that always come to mind for me are that you can become successful in your work by networking with the right people, and by knowing the right people, and by sitting on coattails and riding to the top. And that's not really a sustainable way to do it. And it also is kind of a soulless way to do it. And the other way to do it is to kind of put your head down and to focus on your craft. And if it takes you 10 years as a woodworker to make the most aesthetically beautiful dining room table that suddenly sells like hotcakes, then that's how long it takes. But on the way there, at least you learn to love your medium and to really cherish the craft, and to really, become one with the medium that you're working in. You can't be impatient, but you also have to have a strong sense of direction, and hard work always pays off.
That is very, very wise words. So I've got some quick questions that I've asked pretty much everybody I've had on the podcast. I'd love to run those by you and get your thoughts. I know that you read a lot. Do you have any favorite books related to the American West, and any favorite books just in general?
Yes, I'm so excited about this question, Ed.
Good, me too.
I told you on an Instagram post recently that I've been reading Ladies of the Canyons.
Yes. Which
is great. It's kind of a blend of history, art, the West, and feminism. It's very interesting. It's just, you just got to read it. If you're not reading it, you got to read it.
I've got it sitting right here. My mom gave it to me a few years ago, and I haven't gotten to it, but it's come up several times recently, and so I definitely need to read it. I'm bumping it up on the list.
Cool. And then another one that I have never heard anyone mention on your podcast is Two in the Far North by Margaret Murray. Do you know the Murrays?
No, I've never heard of that either.
So the Murrays, they also have their research cabins are in Teton National Park.
Okay.
But Two in the Far North is about when Margaret and her husband first got married, and he was a caribou biologist. So it actually takes place in Alaska, but it has a lot of great storytelling with regards to. Okay, let me start this again. So they get married, they move to Alaska, and they basically live out of a teepee with they dog sled around and shoot caribou and skin them out and then send the samples back down to the lower 48 to whoever her husband was working for at the time. And so somewhere along the way, she ends up popping out a baby, and they just take this baby with them everywhere in Alaska. And it's crazy where they take this. They take this baby up this remote river. I can't remember which river. Their mosquitoes are heinous. It's hot. It's super treacherous country in the middle of nowhere. And way back in the day when it's you couldn't call in a bush plane to pick you up in an emergency on a sat phone, they're out there. And she just takes this newborn baby with them. We learn, this is another problem I have with society is that we just treat our kids like they're so fragile. But back in the day, people just took their babies places.
Oh, yeah.
And they're hip to do the raise them outdoors stuff that you see lots of girls doing, which is so cool. On Instagram, girls taking their babies fly fishing and all that kind of stuff. It's awesome. I'm yeah. And Margaret Murray kind of did it. She sort of paved the ultra extreme highway of that, because that story and what she does with that baby is awesome. It's crazy and it's totally inspiring. So that's a great book to read also.
That's really cool. And I had not heard of that one. So I'm glad I asked.
Yeah.
Do you read mostly nonfiction, or do you read do you read fiction?
I like both. I love a good quality memoir of like a Western memoir. Like, one that comes to mind is Claiming Ground by Laura Bell. Have you read that one? It's set in the Bighorn Basin of Wyoming.
Oh,
That's
cool.
a great one. I've read so many fabulous memoirs by women of the West. And then there's one that I read, and I wish I could remember the title and the name of the author, but it's about a guy that grows up on a ranch in Wyoming. And it's kind of a run by run or play by play of like his childhood, where ranch kids are like men when they're 8.
Oh yeah.
Right. So it's like all these stories from when he was a kid and he was cowboying, and then it goes all the way up, to the end of his mother's life, basically, and the telling of that story too. But that was one of the most beautifully written memoirs that I've ever read about life in the West. And it was written by a man, which was so surprising to me that I fell in love with it the way that I did, because his writing was so intimate. If I remember the name of it, I'll email it to you, because it's lost to me right now.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think you'll ever write a book?
Yeah, I think I will.
That's awesome. You definitely should. Your writing is amazing. Oh, how did you learn to write so well? Just doing it over and over and over? Because your writing is so clear and descriptive, and it kind of almost reminds me of like Ernest Hemingway type writing. I love it. And how did you do that?
I love Hemingway. Let me tell you that. Lots of ladies hate him because they think he was like a nasty pig to women, but I just think he was one of those dudes that just was so enchanted by like femininity. I just love Hemingway. I love it. And I love his art of omission. I think if you can elegantly, draw out a exquisite picture for people while using as few words as possible, then you're a fabulous storyteller. So I try to omit as much as possible in true Hemingway fashion. I love that man. But I've read, I think you become a good writer if you read a lot. Mm-hmm. And I have to be careful because I get compared to some authors pretty frequently, like, what's her name? Mary Oliver. People tell me a lot of times some of my poems sound like hers, and I actually don't let myself read any of her work because of it. But I've just been reading my whole life. My mom taught me to read at a really young age. I was reading novels actually in grade 1. And I just spent so much of my time with books, and books were my friends too. And I just think I was growing up rurally in these national parks. And I couldn't just get my parents to drive me to a friend's house to play for the day. Like, I really could play outside. I could ride horses. I could build forts with myself and then play with myself. Because my older and my younger sister actually usually excluded me from their games they were playing. This all sounds very tragic and pathetic. I was an orphan within my own family, but it really wasn't as bad as that sounds. But I just, my books were my friends. And as a result, I really have a highly developed imagination because I've just read voraciously my entire life. And I would pound through like 5 or 6 books in a weekend when I was in high school, just because that's what I would do is I would, lay on the couch and read books all day on a Saturday. But I think the more you read, the better you write. And the more you read, the more active your invisible vocabulary is. Mm-hmm. The words you don't usually use in just common conversation. I think all those words are way more active. And as a result, you're just able to describe things better, or you're able to give words to the things that you're seeing better. So read. I read a lot. I love it.
I do too. I really love it. And it's funny, talking about college, and I would have all these assignments in college, and I'm not joking. I honestly think I probably never finished a book that was assigned in college. Never. Oh. And now I'm just cranked through books like a crazy person. I can't stop reading. And very, very strange. That's something either I was off or the college was off or maybe both, but that's quite the contrast.
And if you ever find you have spare time, maybe you should start a book club for us.
I was thinking about that, and I was trying to think about how the logistics of it would work. But I'm thinking about that. I may reach out to pick your brain on that, because I think that'd be a good idea.
You could be the president, and I'll be the vice president of the book.
Awesome. I'll let you do all the talking about the books because I'll sound like a idiot. So we talked about books. Go ahead.
There was one other thing I wanted to mention that I thought you maybe hadn't heard of, and that was Kathleen Norris's 2 books, Dakota and the Cloister Walk. Have you heard of either of those? I
have not. You're stumping me. Every single one of them.
Oh, you're going to love it. It's such a beautiful writing. She and her husband lived in New York. They're both poets. And then her aunt passed away is somewhere in the Dakotas in this small town. And so she moved back to the Dakotas to work and to live in this little rural place. Next to the town that she lives in, there is a Benedictine monastery. So she becomes friends with the monks. But this whole, both of those books are about life in a rural setting, the role that faith, spirituality, and the church has to play in these little rundown country communities. And then also this idea of minimalism that's impressed upon her by these monks that she becomes friends with. And she ends up going into the Benedictine order or studying to be part of the Benedictine order. But it's beautifully written because she's a poet. She knows her way around words. And it's just, it really resonated with me because I'm from the Great Northern Plains. I'm from Saskatchewan. And it's just beautiful. It's beautiful. It's such beautiful writing.
That's awesome.
That's the last book mention I'm going to give you.
Okay. Those are perfect. Those are all great. And I hadn't read any of them, which I think that may be the first time that's happened. So, and I like the book club idea. I got to think about that. Do you have any favorite documentaries or films?
No, I'm so bad at watching documentaries, but Rob and I have been watching lots of Planet Earth and things about like wild African animals lately, like about the zebra. But I know that everyone mentions Ben Master's Mustang movie, and that one is one that I've seen twice actually, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. And I really appreciated the way the quandary of the Mustang was, just really unbiased representation of both sides, I felt, which I really appreciated because hardly anybody can do any kind of reporting these days in an unbiased way. So I just thought he did a great job with that documentary.
Yeah, he's an impressive guy. Right now he's traveling the length of the Texas border, and they're making a new documentary about what would happen if they did go through with this border wall idea and try to put up a border wall on the entire Texas border. And, half of it's like the Grand Canyon. So they're obviously, the idea of a wall there is just silly, but the impact on people, the impact on wildlife. And so it's going to be interesting to see how he puts that together and if he can manage to pull it off in an unbiased way that doesn't just infuriate half the country. I think if anybody can do it, he can. So, pretty cool.
Is he doing that on horseback?
He did. So they did couple hundred miles on mountain bikes, couple hundred miles on horseback, and now they're on canoes going down the Rio Grande. And it looks really cool. And actually, Small World, a buddy of mine that I went to high school with, is with him doing it, and one of the participants in the thing. So I think it's going to be a pretty cool adventure film that hits on some timely political things, just like Unbranded did. So I'm excited to see how that works out for him.
Oh, it sounds super interesting. I hope I get to meet him someday. He seems really interesting.
Yeah, he's cool. He's pretty funny too. So we've talked about all your really cool activities: the running, hunting, silversmithing, reading, photography, writing. Is there anything you do that is unexpected or possibly funny? I always say maybe I should talk to the spouse on this one because I could get some good inside info. But anything weird, funny?
Robert could tell you about all the quirky things I get up to in the span of a day. But we won't have. He went chucker hunting for the day. I kicked him out of the house. He's not here to rat me out for all that stuff. I will. A lot of people don't know that I'm a classically trained pianist. Actually,
oh wow.
My mom had the role. She had just had a real heart for the arts, and she still does. And so, I did a ton of music training. I also played violin and trumpet when I was younger. Was in so many musicals and so many theater productions and so many choirs. So I am a musician. I don't have a piano in my life right now, but I need to get one again because I miss it. So
yeah, that's a good one. That's the real deal. I took piano lessons for like 6 weeks, and my mom realized she was wasting her money, and so that ended that.
I might have quit too, but my mom's definitely a tiger mom. She made me keep at it.
That's cool.
Yeah,
that's great. What is the most powerful experience you've ever had in the outdoors? I imagine this is hard given all your experiences, but it could be scary, it could be funny, it could just be memorable. Is there one experience that comes to mind that you just think, yeah, that was about as intense in a good or bad way as it gets?
Yeah, I've had a lot of experiences. The one I decided that I wanted to tell you about is this one. Our farm is located pretty close to a massive wintering ground here along the Snake River. And I like to go out there when there's snow on the ground. I actually like to schedule it with Tater Tot, our younger shorthair. Mm-hmm. And we were skiing out one day and I saw a massive elk herd in the distance. And just as I saw them, they saw me and they started, moving. And I kept on skiing and they kept on moving. And soon I realized, those animals will develop these little highways in the snow and the sage, and they won't deviate off the path. So I realized that to get away from me, they were actually all moving towards me because they were taking their highway to leave the country. So I started skiing even faster. And they started trotting, and then they were all loping. And soon I was about 15 feet maybe from their main trail, and probably 400 elk loped past me as I squatted down in the snow and held on to Tater, who was losing his mind. But it was just this slow, it was when you get trapped behind a train as it's crossing the tracks and you have no choice but just to sit there and watch all the cars go by for 30 minutes. It was kind of like that. I bet 400 animals ran past me while I just sat there 15 feet from them, and I could see the white of their eyes and I could smell their musk. And I mean, things like that kind of happen to us all the time just because we're outside a lot. But that was a really, really beautiful, memorable elk moment for me, right? Really on my own home territories. It was really beautiful.
That's very cool. They are amazing animals, and you see them from a distance is one thing, but when you get up close to one, it's I keep talking about it brings out things in our DNA, but I think that there's some connection there. It's really, really amazing. Do you have a favorite location in the West? I imagine that's hard as well, given all the cool places you've lived.
Oh, well, I love Idaho. This is where, we thought for a long time we were going to wind up in Montana, and then we wound up coming to Idaho for Rob's job, and just really fell in love with this state. And it's a combination of just how much public land there is, but also a really low density of human population. It's just really empty and really undiscovered still, and we cherish that about it. We really value personal space and access to public land, and this is a state for that for sure. But I don't like to give away my secret spots in Idaho, so I'm not going to say more than that. And you can't even tickle it out of me. I like to keep that stuff a secret. So, but the whole state is amazing, and I'm lucky. If you're lucky enough to live in Idaho, you're lucky enough. It's just a beautiful, beautiful state.
I agree with all that, and that's a wise move, not telling anybody. That's the same thing Ben Masters did. He refused to give me anything, so I think that's good.
Well, you got to protect it a little bit. You see, I've mentioned a hike once and now it's it's just trampled and covered in human poop, and it's an age of innocence lost as soon as the Instagrammers find it. You got to be careful with that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I don't know if I have an answer for that question.
It's hard. I always ask these questions, but I don't have any answers, so I shouldn't be asking them, but that's a tough one.
What's the best advice you've ever been given?
Let me think. It's not really advice that anybody gave me, it was something I heard the other day that I've been thinking about a lot. There was, it was some author that I was listening to an interview with, and he said, mood, you can rarely change your mood through thought, but you can often change your mood through action.
No, I think I get the gist of it.
Yeah,
yeah. You can stew in your own juices, or you can get off your butt, kind of.
Yeah, you just got to go. And there was another one I saw, just a one-liner. It said, mood follows action. And I thought that was pretty good.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, you just got to go. You can't sit around thinking all day. which I have a tendency to do. So seeing everything you've seen in the West, you've lived in Canada and different parts of the U.S. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing the American West these days?
Well, I mean, a lot of people say water. I sometimes wonder if our culture is kind of under attack in the West. I mean, I think there's a spirit. I think people who are in the West and who are of the West have a certain independence and, I don't want to call it like a rebellious nature, but we kind of do what we want out here. And sometimes I wonder if that's getting worn down and washed away and diluted a bit by big city values, people coming from, big cities to smaller cities in the West or to towns and kind of expecting to have all the same commodities and the same pace of life. I wonder if that's kind of wearing down the Western spirit a little bit. I mean, I don't know. What do you think about that?
I agree with, just from a practical standpoint, I think the water is big. I agree with that. And then I also agree with that, with what you said. And I think it's what we were talking about a little bit before we started recording, that just the speed of information and the internet and all that kind of stuff, it is erasing regionalism. Is that a word? And and so the West is just like the Southeast where I grew up. A lot of people there don't have Southern accents anymore. and I think it just, it's kind of making everything the same if you're not careful. Does that make sense?
That totally makes sense. And to touch on it too, I just think of all the ghost towns you see cropping up in the West because kids don't want to stay on the ranches or kids don't want to stay on the farms or, people want to go to the big city, this mass exodus of up and coming generations of kids. Like I don't know. I think the West is under threat in that way as well, with just the, family legacy leaving for what they think are greener pastures, kind of like, how do we retain Western families and keep them doing the thing that they've always done, which is full of heritage and is really what our culture in the West is rooted in. That's something I think about sometimes too.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge. When you look at ranchers, the average rancher right now, I think their age is somewhere in the mid 60s, and the people are moving out, and there's not going to be people really to take over these properties as these baby boomers move on. And so I don't know. I think that's very true. So last question, and it's kind of a big one, but if you could make a request of the people listening to this podcast, and it's people who love the American West in one way or the other, whether through ranching or conservation or art or athletics, if you could offer some advice or ask something of them, what would that be?
Oh, that's a hard question too. I don't know. I think the other threat, I think this is going back to the previous question. I think our public lands are definitely under threat in the West as well. And I think we've got to have a refuge for our wildlife. We also need a safe haven for ourselves. I think our wild places are the things that are the places that save our souls, really. And so if you don't live in the West, come see the West and come see the land here and fall in love with it the way that we do, and see for yourselves that it's worth cherishing and preserving and keeping safe and keeping healthy and whole and in balance, and fall in love with it like we love it. Help us save it.
I think that's a perfect way to end it. So how can people connect with you online?
Oh, everything's the Noisy Plume, basically. And I have impossible to spell last name for anyone who's not Polish. So so definitely just look up the Noisy Plume, and my main mothership website will come up, and I'm at the Noisy Plume on Instagram, and that's pretty much it.
Well, thank you very much. This was awesome. So great to chat with you.
So good to chat with you too, Ed. Thank you.
Hey, it's Ed again. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast, and thanks for listening to that particular episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Before you go, I've got 3 quick things. Number 1, if you like the podcast, please do me a huge favor. Either pass it along to a friend who may be interested, share it on your social media, or go to iTunes and give it a 5-star review. All those things would mean a lot to me, and they would really help to spread the word about the podcast. Number 2, if you've listened to many of these episodes, you know that I love reading and I love talking about books. Every other month, I send out a quick email with a few books that I've recently read and highly recommend. The subjects are varied, but they're pretty much all nonfiction with an emphasis on history, biographies, adventure narratives, and topics related to the American West. There are no sales pitches for ranches, no spam, no other kind of nonsense, just books. So if you'd like to sign up for the list, head to Mountain and Prairie/reading, or just go to Mountain and Prairie and there's a massive tab at the top that says book recommendations. Click on it. There are a ton of good books that I've read. Some of the old email lists are on there. You can go crazy. There are a lot of books. And finally, if you know anyone I should interview for the podcast, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. All my contact info is at mountainandprairie.com, and I'm on all the social media stuff, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. So feel free to reach out. I'd love to have some recommendations and suggestions of interesting people I should meet. All right, that's it. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.